Well, for November in Ontario, we've got an absolutely gorgeous day. Unbelievable weather. We've had terrible weather in September for this thing. My name is Mark Girard, and I am a patient safety advocate, in particular for the FluoroQuinolone antibiotics. I'm here with my friend and fellow drug safety advocate, David Carmichael, who is the executive director of Canadians for Vanessa's law, which is a stringent regulation holding pharmaceutical companies accountable for their abuses. And he's also with the Know Your Drugs Foundation. And we're doing this on November 6th because it's the anniversary of passing Vanessa's law in 2014. And the message that we have today is that adverse drug reactions are vastly underreported. The efficacy is also exaggerated, so not only are the drugs not as good as the doctors believe they are, they're far, far more harmful. And so the result is that the benefit to risk ratio is not even anything like the average doctor believes it is. We're asking for research into metadata into the harm that various drugs do. We look at certain drugs and compare them to certain conditions, and we're in the ideal spot for that because behind me here is the Ontario Legislative Assembly building, the Parliament of Ontario, and down that way is what we call Hospital Row. There is just one big hospital after another, after another, after another. It's Canada's foremost collection of hospitals, one of the premier collection of hospitals in the world, really. And so this is the ideal spot to arrange that research because the people who pay for those hospitals are behind us, and that's why we're doing this on a provincial level in Canada more than on the federal level, although we will start having rallies in Ottawa, where I live as well. So the problem is that when the people get harmed by these drugs, not only are the adverse reactions common, but they get misdiagnosed as conditions that they're not. And so what happens is people get prescribed more drugs that cause more problems. And they don't help because we don't actually have that condition. And the cost to society of this is astronomical. People go from being tax-paying, hard-working, contributing citizens who, are coaches on their teams. They run prayer groups at church. They drive people around, whatever. They're, advocating for causes. They're doing things to benefit society. They're just out spending money and driving the economy. What happens is they stop being able to work and instead end up costing an enormous amount of money. They need medicines, they need surgeries, they need counseling, they need transportation to and from many, many doctor's appointments, and the transition from getting money from people and having them contribute to the catastrophic loss of their everything that they contribute is just so disabling. I was a chef for most of my life. I worked some other jobs, delivering stuff in trucks, drove a concrete mixer. I was a hard-working, hard-playing man, and I was given the antibiotics Cipro and then Levaquin back-to-back in 2007. And before you know it, it's just like they were given to me in the hospital. Within 17 days, I had blood clots, broken blood vessels, collapsed lung. I had spontaneous tendon ruptures. I needed a cartilage transplant from a dead child. I had gastrointestinal problems, brain pressure, cognitive problems, anxiety attacks. My teeth and started cracking and crumbling. My hair started falling out. Just one thing after another, after another, after another, after another, in rapid succession, all pretty much all at once. And this isn't unusual. Our support groups are chock full of people with basically the same story. The symptoms vary, but we all experience head-to-toe devastation. Now, this isn't necessarily true for all drugs, because the FluoroQuinolones are probably the most toxic drugs on the market, and they are from a class of drugs normally used for chemotherapy, and yet doctors are handing them out like candy. In the U.S., it's about 30 million prescriptions a year. In Canada, it's about 3.5 million prescriptions a year. So we're actually getting them even more in Ontario and in Canada than they prescribe in the U.S. Most countries are on a decline, and unfortunately, Canada's use of fluoroquinolones is increasing. And one of the things that's affected me is my eyes. I wasn't even sure I was going to be able to pull this rally off this year. I wasn't able to drive. I normally drive here with a car full of supplies, and I'm normally a lot more organized. And this year I had to wait until the last minute and decide that between my health and the poor vision and the pandemic we have going on, we didn't even know we could do this. So we're here. We're making it happen. We're not getting the help we need from the doctors. When they misdiagnose us, treat us, we get harmed further by them. And when we try and tell them that the medicines that they're trying to encouraging us to take aren't helping, or they're making us sicker or whatever, they get angry. They fire us as patients. They report us as non-compliant. They claim that we're trying fraudulently to get disability money that we don't deserve. They label us in ways that make it hard to get a doctor. You know, another doctor will look at the report and not be willing to see us. And so this is a major problem. We need doctors to be aware that this is happening, especially with the fluoroquinolones, because of the catastrophic nature of the harm that they're doing. But with all drugs, different people have different issues with different drugs. The fact of the matter is that adverse reactions are hundreds of times as common as reported. The system is clunky and difficult and time-consuming and challenging, and so it's difficult to get a doctor to acknowledge that you've had an adverse reaction, or even to find out. We represent an enormous population of people who have no idea what happened to them. They have been told that they have lupus, or ALS, or Parkinson's disease, or an autoimmune disorder, or fibromyalgia, or any of 100 other conditions that they don't have, and so they're not getting the treatment for what they actually do have, the fluoroquinolone toxicity. So again, I want to present. We've been trying to get someone from the community of people that have been harmed by anti-malarials like mefloquine, and for one reason or another, health issues, they are not able to join us once again today. And hopefully one year we'll be able to get some of them out here and work with them. We've attended some of their rallies and helped support them. And I just want to thank Philip Brooks for putting together a little spiel for me to speak for him on his behalf, on behalf of the mefloquine community. He is he's a member of the International Mefloquine Awareness Alliance, and he's the founder and director of Operation Seen, which is about unseen brain injuries and central nervous system damage, basically caused by pharmaceuticals. He's reported that in addition to, like so many of the rest of us, the prescription of drugs has led to further, the damage by the mefloquine has led to prescriptions of antipsychotics and antidepressants and other anti-anxiety drugs that have caused further damage. And so he is too sick to join us today. He just says that we can do a better job of diagnosing and treating brain and central nervous system injuries. that affect society on so many levels. We could do a better job of managing our national pharmaceutical shelves, and we can do more to hold the medical professionals accountable for their actions. This is, we're being harmed, and it's a crime what's happening to us. More education and more training would be the best place to start from a point of truth and honesty about what's happening. And just addressing the polypharmacy, the multi-drugging, the idea that if you've got 5 issues, that it's okay to just give you 5 drugs and then to give you 4 more drugs for the adverse reactions the first 5 drugs are causing. That is the standard medical model right now. And when you have problems and you go into the hospital for your adverse reaction, their first thing to do is give you more drugs. They put you on an IV and they pump you full of more drugs. And we need to cut back our use of drugs to a fraction of 10%, 5%, 2% of what we're doing now. We're just absolutely going crazy, pouring drugs into the population and then pouring more drugs into the population to treat the problems the drugs are causing. And so that was sort of my conclusion of my rewording of what Philip had to say. Again, there are other drugs that cause all kinds of problems, and my friend David will give you some more information on that in a few minutes after we regroup and make sure that all our things are broadcasting properly and recording properly, and we'll make sure our batteries are charged and everything. So I may come back afterwards, and who knows, maybe Terry will speak. We're just sort of scrambling to make this happen. Thank you for listening, everybody, and please share this far and wide. This is just so important.
Well, my name is David Carmichael, and I'm Executive Director of a charitable organization called Canadians for Vanessa's Law. And the first thing I want to do is tell Mark, Terry, how honored I am to be here today. We have lucked out on the weather. It's also Know Your Drugs Day. And the message of Know Your Drugs Day, which is an initiative of Canadians for Vanessa's Law, is for people to research the side effects of the drugs they're taking. And now our message has also been extended to report any suspected adverse drug reactions in this country to Health Canada, in the United States to the FDA, and in other countries to the drug regulator. Vanessa's Law is the Protecting Canadians from Unsafe Drugs Act. It was passed 6 years ago. It became a law, received royal assent. And it was driven through Parliament by a former member of Parliament from Oakville, which is where I live now and where Canadians for Vanessa's Law operates from. Member of Parliament Terrance Young, a 2-term member of Parliament. In the year 2000, Terrance's daughter Vanessa, at 15 years of age, died in front of him from the side effect of a drug called Propulsive, which was taken off the market by Health Canada. And it was a heartburn drug, and she had a heart attack. And like many people who have lost loved ones, who have been harmed permanently or just dealing with dysfunctional issues for their life, they become the advocates. They become the driving force behind the movements, like Mark, Terry, Cindy, others involved with the FluoroQuinolone movement. And unfortunately, that's what it takes. It takes a personal experience usually to start advocating for drug safety, and we need to expand that. Because as so well articulated by Mark, and Philip stole a lot of my talk, the malaria group that's not here this year, but the message is repetitive. You take one drug, you have an adverse reaction, a doctor will give you another drug, because their major source of information, as much as we would like to think this isn't true, comes from the pharmaceutical industry, who know how to dress this up and to sell it. And that happens globally, and that's why Know Your Drugs is a global awareness campaign. Coming back to Canada, Vanessa's Law has potentially changed the way we regulate the pharmaceutical industry in this country. In the United States, they're penalized, what we might think is quite extensively, for fraud, for misleading advertising, for other issues, through the False Claims Act. and they're into the tens of billions of dollars, which really is not a lot for the pharmaceutical industry. Very few of them ever go to prison for fraud or illegal criminal activities. Vanessa's law, what it did in 2014, on November 6th, on this day 6 years ago, is it gave Health Canada the power, if they were to enforce the law, to hold the pharmaceutical companies accountable for any type of misrepresentation, for concealing data, for not telling the truth. And if they did not comply with Health Canada up until 6 years ago, they would be fined $5,000 a day. For example, if they were asked to send out a warning and they didn't do it, $5,000 a day. Now it's $5 million a day potentially, and possible jail time, prison time. And we need to get that law enforced.
Yes.
In 6 years, nothing's happened with it except December 16th, 2019, there was one regulation that came into play. And when I looked down University Avenue, and I know the cameras are facing Queen's Park, but it's marked so well articulated, this is Hospital Row. Hospitals are now required by Vanessa's law to report any serious adverse drug reaction within 30 days. I am soon, in the middle of December, going to put in a Freedom of Information request to try to find out how many hospitals have actually reported serious adverse drug reactions. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest barriers to all of this is that the pharmaceutical companies will deny two things. We've seen this with the opioid crisis in the United States. Purdue Pharma, which in 1995 introduced OxyContin and contributed to this whole opioid crisis, getting people addicted, they've just been penalized about $8 billion through bankruptcy proceedings. There might still be some criminal charges against a family called the Sackler family. But through the opioid crisis, what we're realizing is not a lot of these adverse reactions are being reported, and the pharmaceutical companies deny any wrongdoing and deny any causality. Because causality is very difficult to prove. But what we need to do is to make sure Health Canada sees the correlation. And don't wait until you can prove you've had an adverse reaction. If something is wrong with you, go to risk.org, risk.org. And that's really part of Know Your Drugs Day, to go and research your side effects. You can also find out through their website whether the drug might be causing your reaction. And the doctor may say this may be part of your condition, your illness, your disease. A lot of the time it's not. I'm going to finish by sharing my story because I've been exposed mainly to psychiatric drugs and people harmed by benzodiazepines and antidepressants, particularly a type of antidepressant called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And I'm finding right now a very difficult time with the COVID-19 pandemic. Because what we are finding is that people are going through what I went through in 2003. They're losing their jobs, they're having cash flow problems, financial challenges. And there are many ways to deal with this. My previous career, I used to be involved with Participaction. I was a director of national projects back until they closed the door the first time in 2001. I was involved in promoting physical activity and sport. And in 2003, when I was dealing with cash flow challenges, I went to my family doctor and I was told that I needed Paxil, an SSRI antidepressant. And I was also told it was going to correct a chemical imbalance in my brain. So I was convinced I needed it. And it was from more than just my doctor. I was convinced that I had a chemical imbalance in my brain when I was mentally distressed. What I was experiencing was distress, mental distress, not clinical depression. But along comes Paxil in 2003. I've been on it, had some side effects. Some of the side effects were quite uncomfortable, sexual dysfunction, I put on weight. I was on it for 8 months. I missed taking it. Picked up a book called Guides to Drug in Canada, and I talked to some people, family members who actually were my coaches around these drugs. And I weaned myself off over 5 weeks and I was doing well. And I was also doing well financially at the time. I had several contracts that I was working on. I was an independent consultant at the time. And I was directing a children's summer camp. brand new summer camp in Toronto in the summer of 2004. And I was sleep deprived. And that's happening to a lot of people when they get distressed. You don't have to rush towards getting a sleep aid. You know, there are different ways to catch up on your sleep, you know, that I've had to learn in a very tragic way. And I put myself back on. What I had was a full prescription, and again, I got some advice for doing it, including medical advice that I had a full prescription. I started 40 milligrams of Paxil again because I basically crashed like a breakdown. But it came on very quickly, like a freight train. And I started to have suicidal thoughts. And when I started to have these suicidal thoughts, I knew there was something wrong, and I was told, again, my doctor prescribed 60 milligrams before, which was the maximum recommended dosage back in 2004. It's now 40 milligrams. So they've learned through anecdotal evidence is what they would call it, these drugs can do sometimes quite a bit of harm, because I went from being suicidal to looking at a murder-suicide, and when I was 60 milligrams I became psychotic. I had delusions. I had 5 different delusions going on in my mind based off really nothing. I'm going to look back on it now, but in July 2004, my son, who had mild epilepsy, he never had a grand mal seizure. I thought had permanent brain damage. He was a late developer. Thought he was teased by a lot of kids that he was living hell. I thought he was going to kill my daughter. My wife was going to have a breakdown. I thought he was going to hurt other children. In my own mind, when I was delusional, and I know this is very hard to understand, I was psychotic, but the best thing I could do for my son was take his life, and I did. On July 31st, 2004, I took my son's life, and I was charged with first-degree murder. I went through the criminal justice system. I was found to be not criminally responsible. There was no question that I was suffering from psychosis at the time. And I went through the forensic psychiatric system. I was out of it in early 2010. I'm now back with my wife and daughter. She was 14 years old at the time. And answered the door for the Toronto police. It's miraculous. Well, I'm breathing back together with that. And to this day, GlaxoSmithKline denies any wrongdoing. It denies any causality. So I'm up to prove it. And again, I want to thank Mark for inviting me here today. It's always difficult to talk about this. I've been off all medication for over a decade now. You know, I haven't experienced any mental illness, diagnosed with mental illness before that or since that. And it's the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing with Canadians with Vanessa's Law, and why I'm speaking out when I can. So, for all of you who have been harmed by these drugs, please stay strong. Get involved in drug safety or patient safety advocacy. We need you. And to me, I'm going to come back to the main message for me today. Today is Know Your Drugs Day. Go to risk.org, rxisk.org. Research the side effects of any drugs that you're on. But I think what my main message is evolving to, 95% of adverse drug reactions reported to the FDA in 2019 came from the pharmaceutical industry. And they were mandated to report them, not from hospitals, which now Vanessa's Law covers, not from doctors, and very few from consumers or their parents, guardians, or caregivers. We need to report suspected. You don't need proof. You're not going to get it, and there's always going to be denial. If you suspect you've had an adverse drug reaction, please contact your government regulator of the pharmaceutical industry and complete the information so they have it. That's the only way I think we're going to see the change that we need to say, where we can take what I think is a chronic sickness care system right now, because it's been built over decades by the pharmaceutical industry, back to a real healthcare system where we take drugs when we need them, and usually only on an acute basis, not drugs for us.
When I was blocked and through this since 2007, I couldn't have possibly imagined a hell worse than what I went through until I met David. Right? You can't compare them to apples and oranges, but they're all the horror stories. And for Philip, he can't be here today, and it's just hard. It's hard. Thank you. Our time is cameras running out. We were hoping that there'd be news cameras here. So far, no one's showed up. But we'll keep doing this year after year, and one day this will be huge. We envision in the future that Toronto will be the site of a massive annual convention, a symposium, a conference, if you will, where doctors from these hospitals and hospitals around the world meet with each other to discuss how to treat fluoroquinolone toxicity. Hopefully we'll have researchers presenting all kinds of new studies, research at the universities, and we'll have thousands of people out here. We'll need a row of 20 pit toilets just to accommodate the crowd. We'll book whole hotels full of flocks people, other hotels full of researchers, other hotels full of people from government agencies around the world, politicians and bureaucrats meeting to come together with a plan to address this massive, massive crisis. And families and family members and loved ones of the flocks people here as well, supporting them and helping wheel them around in their wheelchairs and making sure that they can get to and from the washrooms. Just most of us have, certain bladder problems. This is a challenge for us today. Normally we order our own pit toilet that they let us put right there for us because we wet ourselves. It's so hard to put this together. And we just thank you for watching. And we need to tear down now and go to the bathroom. Thank you, everybody. Please share these videos. Thanks.